This is the fireplace room, so maybe you can think of this as a little fireside chat this morning. We come to the benediction in Hebrews, and the benediction of a worship service is my favorite part of a worship service, for reasons other than what you might think. Okay? It is a time to tell you who you are in God's eyes. Beloved daughter, beloved son, and to speak directly good words, good diction words, good words to you in a direct way that sermons cannot get at. So the benediction is the good word that the preacher of Hebrews has been leading us to all along the way. And his benediction is a benediction of hope. The benediction of hope through Jesus coming to fully share our human sufferings, committing to labors of love, transforming those he calls brothers and sisters, and then being raised or led up by God from the dead. So indeed, hope is the heartbeat song of Hebrews. And I ask myself the question, what is at the heart of Hebrews to me? What's my so what takeaway from all of this? That's the question. So let me try to answer it from my own heart as best I can. First of all, Hebrews, as Anne has mentioned, is an utterly practical message of hope for all of those who are tired and uninspired and feel like faith has become too cold in some ways, too bold in other words, or too fake or too dangerous or not worth it at all. And this chapter gets at the heart of it all from me with words like, let mutual love continue. Show hospitality to strangers. Remember those in prison. Honor marriage. Keep free from the love of money. Be content. Don't be afraid. Respect leadership. Trust Jesus. Do good. Share what you have. And so these are not casual, carefree matters here. There is a sense of urgency to this, because there is no time to wait and see what happens. Someone at Calvary, week before last, described to me a wait and see mentality around here. And I'm not sure what that means. But the person sharing with me said that there seems to be some around Calvary who are wait and see. Maybe wait and see about worship. Maybe wait and see about this young pastoral staff that we have. Yikes. Wait and see maybe if we'll be effective as leaders or successful, whatever that means, before they really fully commit or even recommit their time, their heart, their energy, and yes, their money to the cause of Christ through Calvary. Some of you think that we talk too much about money around here. You might be right, but we're in good company. Jesus talked about money more than anything else. Hebrews talks about money in the benediction of hope in today's chapter. But Hebrews also talks about not shrinking back. In other words, there is no time to wait and see if we should love each other. There is no time to wait and see if we should be generous. This is not a time to sit on our hands and wait and see. And Hebrews says this all along. The future is now. And as a friend of mine once said to me, Andrew, when our memories become greater than our dreams, the end is near. Well, the preacher of Hebrews is doing everything he can to persuade the people that their dreams need to be bigger and better and bolder than ever before. The same thing that goes for the church in Hebrews goes for churches around our country today. And it goes for us here at Calvary. The thing that I love the most, too, about Hebrews is it offers both a mix of tough love at times, hitting on touchy subjects like money and sex, and extending hospitality to people who look homeless and hungry and hurt. And as we've seen along the way, he can be stern, even severe at times. And I think this is why the preacher of Hebrews can speak in such an open and candid manner with his congregation. Beyond the insults at the beginning of the sermon in Hebrews, you remember those? He called them babies. They're just a bunch of babies, dull and understanding. And the threats and fear-inducing language in the middle of chapter 6, do you remember? Saying it is impossible to restore to repentance those who were once enlightened and then have fallen away. We finally get to the clincher for all of this, though, because when he says in chapter 6, even though we speak in this way, beloved, even though we speak directly, even though we speak in a way that makes you flinch, or be restless in your seats, we are confident of better things in your case, things that belong to salvation. And Hebrews is profound in that the preacher reminds the people who they are. That's what benedictions do. They remind us of who we are directly. And the preacher of Hebrews all along has been reminding them of who they were, people who took care of the sick and took in the stranger. The preacher is reminding the people of their past, coaching them up, so to speak, about how confident and compassionate and steadfast amidst suffering that they had been. Remember the words, recall those earlier days when after you had been enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to abuse and persecution, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion for those who were in prison. You cheerfully accepted the plundering of your possessions, knowing that you yourselves possessed something better and more lasting. Calvary, the preacher's message to the congregation in Hebrews is a lot like the message that we need to hear today for the present and future of our congregation. There are times when we need some tough love, when we need a good talking to. And there are times when we need to be reminded of just who we are. But we can't let the memories of our past be bigger or bolder or better than the dreams and hopes for our future. And it's in your hands, dearly beloved. You have the same power to offer the sacrifice of praise, as the text says today, the sacrifice of doing good, the sacrifice of sharing what you have in the same spirit of Jesus Christ as the people in Hebrews did. Now for the more fireside chat part. You thought I was almost finished. This week you received a letter in the mail about some hard decisions that Ann and Calvary leadership have had to make in light of the financial squeeze that we are in. If you haven't heard, there are a few decisions that had to be made recently that are very difficult ones, that affect our staff, that affect our staff's families, that affect real people. The elimination of our communications position at Calvary, the reduced hours of our office and facilities manager, and the closing of our office on Fridays. And then there's my decision to, as of November 1, be half-time status here at Calvary. What I have written up as a modified furlough approach, with the hope that I might be able to come back full-time in January, but there's no promise of that, and I understand. But I want you all to know that my decision, and speaking for myself, is a personal and spiritual decision for me. And I do not make it lightly. I actually make it with a lot of bold hope in Calvary's future, in my own. I am open-eyed about the way this impacts my family, my life personally, my life professionally. But I also believe that right now it's in the best interest of Calvary financially for me to make this decision. And it's one I make of my own free accord. And I do it with boldness. I do it with hope. And I do it with no certainty. Only the certainty of the known God, who will always be here for us. In the words of Jesus, will never leave us nor forsake us. And the reality is that there is an economics to ministry that comes with doing ministry the way Calvary does ministry. Following Jesus is not free. Doing the ministry that we do costs us something in more ways than one. And even though Jesus calls us to count the cost, not cut the cost, alas, we have to make hard decisions sometimes. So my friends, I tell you this morning, it's time for our own spiritual and financial gut check here at Calvary. And this is what Hebrews has been to me, a spiritual gut check, helping me find a way of being more honest with God, more honest with myself, a gut check on asking myself, what really does matter anyway? And facing the truth of what I find in that. The inspiration to be bold, to make bold decisions, being empowered as a leader to lead by action and not just with words, and to not be afraid, but to trust my unknown future to the known Christ who raises hope in me even now like I've never quite felt before, frankly. And it is my hope that you will feel that hope too, friends, and take action. Let mutual love continue. Show hospitality to strangers. Remember those in prison. Honor marriage. Keep free from the love of money. Be content. Trust Jesus. Do good. Share what you have. This is the heart of Hebrews to me.
The thing that struck me the most about the book of Hebrews is its strong convictions, its certainty about things like hope and faith. I tend to be a person that likes the gray. I like to live in the gray. When things start to get too black and white, I start to feel a little too boxed in. It gets too predictable and prescribed for me. With too much stuff set in stone, I fear that there's not enough stuff left up to the Spirit. And you all know how I feel about the Spirit. I believe that the Spirit is alive and at well and at work within each one of us as individuals and among all of us as a community. However, as a pastor and as a leader, there is a cost in leaving so much up to the Spirit. And the cost is that sometimes the convictions that I believe wholeheartedly and desperately want you, my congregation, to believe wholeheartedly are left uncommunicated. Or if they are communicated, I'm not as clear as I could be, for fear of people thinking that if they can't live up to these convictions, that they can't be a part of this community, which is the last thing that I want. You don't have to share my convictions to be part of Calvary, but you do need to know that I have them and that I'm serious about them. Some of you know that the senior pastor before Mary Holst, Larry Lowhead, used to end his sermons by saying, "Think about that." The implication is, of course, that even though Larry had just shared a bunch of his thoughts with the congregation, they had a responsibility to go off and think about all that he said on their own and decide for themselves what they thought. Even though I don't end my sermons with, "Think about that," I understand the sermonic moment in the same way. I share some thoughts, or Andrew and I share some thoughts that have been formed by scholars and commentators and current events and sports, TV, music, literary references, thoughts that have been culled through with prayer, with the hope that you go off on your own and think your own thoughts about the matter, not believe what I say point blank. But I think by not always sharing my convictions forthrightly and with a kind of forcefulness of heart with you, I have let you down. I have let us down. Not because I've done anything wrong, but because the community, the church, hasn't been given the opportunity to truly do things in a way that rightly reflects the love of Christ, but also rightly reflects the cost of being community together. It's easy to come to church and consume. To consume worship like you do a movie. To consume a small group like you do a class at school. To consume the bread and the cup like you do a meal around your dinner table. To consume pastoral care like you do a good conversation with a friend. The thing is, when we consume, whether we're consuming a TV show or a great meal, we're in a posture of receiving whatever it is we want to receive at the moment. If you don't like the TV show, you turn it off. If you don't like the food, you stop eating it. And we all know what happens when we don't stop doing those things. We end up wasting a perfectly good evening watching bad TV, or we end up stuffed and bloated from food that wasn't worth the calories. Well, consumption is not the posture we are to have before Christ. Conviction is. A posture of conviction means you worship not because you like the music or don't like the music, the sermon or don't like the sermon, but because you feel deeply that God is receiving your song and your heart in this moment. It's not about what one of us likes or doesn't like. Worship is about spending pure, focused time, being in the complete presence of God, which is not easy. A posture of conviction means you commit to being a part of a small group or a church school class, because without such group study and accountability, you know your faith will grow stale and stagnant. Or perhaps you're convicted to lead such a group, because we can't have groups without leaders. Without small groups, how else will you have the church knowing the ups and downs of your life and praying for you along the way? Our prayer list is distributed, yes, to everyone to read, but our prayer life is made up of real life prayer that happens in small groups throughout this church every week. A posture of conviction means you find a way to serve Christ in the church as a volunteer and outside the church as one of our mission volunteers with a mission partner. Why? Because the number one thing we are to do is to love others as Jesus loves us. And Jesus, much to my dismay, didn't love others through writing lovely notes of encouragement or good thoughts. Jesus loved others by pushing through crowds, breaking rules on the Sabbath, listening to the needs of the people in front of him who were interrupting his day. Jesus loved others by getting his hands dirty, touching lepers, mixing mud to heal blind people, pulling up fishing nets, breaking bread in strangers' homes, and washing the weather. And why do we need to serve both inside the church and outside the church? Because God's kingdom is both inside the church and outside the church. A posture of conviction means you welcome all people because God loves all people. Period. End of sentence. A posture of conviction means you give money to the church, and not just a little, but a lot. Doesn't this church mean a lot to you? Then why would you not give a lot to it? You know in your gut what a lot is to you. The tithe, 10% of your income, is proportional. It's a great equalizing standard for us. It doesn't matter how much money you make, we're all giving equally. But for some of us, a lot isn't a tithe. It's more than that. And for some of you, I know a lot is far less than a tithe because you're barely scraping by. And that's fine too. The point is to ask yourself the question, how important is your faith community? And what is it worth to you? This past week, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that we heard from so many of you when we were exploring the possibility of selling our building because people couldn't bear the thought of Calvary being anywhere else but here. Well, the only reason we were exploring that possibility was because of the financial situation we were in last spring and that we are still in today. Can you still bear the thought of Calvary not being here or being around at all? Our building is old and things will keep breaking, won't they, Art? Our staff is young, and we will burn out and break down unless we leave before that happens. Calvary can run on volunteers. It's just that it's hard to find that feasible because we've struggled so much to find volunteers for key ministries in this church. Things were different 20 years ago. We all know that. We had more time. Our lives were spread less thin. But now, we've run into volunteers, mostly of retired people, and we love you. We couldn't do the ministry of this church without you. But without volunteers in all demographics of our church, we can't keep going. We can't just rely on staff. A church can't thrive that way. A posture of conviction means you pray, even when you don't know if it makes a difference or if anyone is listening. You pray because prayer is a signal that it's not all up to us, that God is leading us, not our own egos or our own wish lists. I guess the heart of what I'm saying is that I have convictions about what it means to be a part of this community of faith we call Calvary. And my convictions are about the commitments that we make to one another. We don't just go to church, do we? We say this is our church. These commitments of worship and faith formation, service and welcome, generosity and prayer, they're not arbitrary. They're practices that draw us nearer to the heart of Christ and therefore nearer to the hearts of one another. I experience the heart of God here at Calvary. Rest assured, I promise you, I would not be here if I didn't. When things have been hard, and I've wondered if I could keep going, as your pastoral leader, I have drawn strength again and again from my deep belief that the mission of our church is reflecting the love and the life and desires of Christ. And you reflect that love to me too. I love you, Calvary, and I love God. And as I listen to God, and as I seek discernment as your senior pastor, I know that we need a recommitment to these basic core convictions or values of our church and of the Christian life in general. In the midst of all the gray of life, they are the black and white practices that keep us anchored in hope, grounded in God's love. So I'm inviting us to get up out of our consuming posture, if that's the posture we find ourselves in, and settle into a posture of active conviction about our love for God and our love for this church. Think not of what you want from Calvary, but what the ministry of Christ wants from you for Calvary. That's what I'm thinking about anyway. And please, Calvary, I'm asking you to think about that too. Amen.
Good morning, my family, my community. I love you so much. And so, we talk about when the Spirit moves and when we feel compelled to speak. And as I've been watching and listening and just thinking about who we are, I'm kind of surprised that I'm standing here. Someone had said to me 15 years ago, Ann Comstock, you're going to be standing in front of a family who loves you, who's a part of you, and you're going to be asking for something. I never would have believed it. But I just need you to know how much this room of people is and can be, and how much it means to me. And so here's what I think. I think each one of us needs to have a conversation. And it's only a conversation between us and our God. And we just need to be talking to him, her, whoever, about, am I doing enough? Am I being a part of Calvary? Am I giving enough? Am I loving enough? The answer to that question is only you and God's to know. I believe that someone who's been here a day, someone who's been here 50 years, someone who gives $1, someone who gives $100,000. It doesn't matter. What matters is us. And I'm just praying. I'm going to have the conversation. I just pray that all of us have the strength to have it, to listen, and to be a part of all that this community of God can be. I love you all, and I'm grateful every moment that I know that you're a part of me. Amen.